Welcome to the launch of the Growth Summit. My name is Doug McCluskey. I'm the Managing Partner of Private Client Services inside PricewaterhouseCoopers. And it's my pleasure to open the Growth Summit and introduce Vern this evening. The National Summit for us is a fantastic partner and we're pleased to be a platinum sponsor this year. So one of the driving forces behind the Growth Summit is, of course, Vern Harnish, and Vern plays an integral role in the Growth Summit, and he'll be back out here in February to lead the mini Think Week that Vern calls the Growth Summit, and to help you and your team prepare successfully for 2010 and beyond. We're delighted to have Vern with us today, and I'd love you to welcome him to the stage.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we are so excited that you guys are part of this, and we've always talked about the importance of that leg of the stool. In fact, John D. Rockefeller was an accountant by training, and it's that kind of discipline and looking at the financial side of the business, which I think has always been kind of a weakness in growth companies. And so the fact that you guys are here and supporting that, I think, is critical moving forward. I don't know about you, but we're seeing already the acquisitions happening. The real, I think, serious growth companies are saying, we love kind of these downturns. And I know you guys have avoided the recession technically, but in talking to a lot of the private companies, I know there's been some places that you've been hit. But you know what the good news is? That puts fear in a lot of people. And if you can have this mindset where you're not playing not to lose, but you can play to win, you've got, I think, 6, 12, maybe 18 months to get out there and grab significant market share and take advantage of some resources. Again, acquisitions a lot of our friends are doing for practically no money. Talent that you're able to grab a hold of so that, as you said, you are ready to come back and take advantage when this market comes around. And I think it's going to be turbulent for quite a while. And so the reason we're taking this idea of going global, getting lean for the Growth Summit is, I think, two things. The only, I think, difference about this downturn versus any we've ever had before is we've got a counterbalancing effect, what I'm going to call probably one of the largest blue ocean opportunities the world has ever seen, industry has ever seen in the history of business. And that is, we've got 1 billion people that are coming in to the middle class in literally the next dozen years. Just finished reading a book called The Global Retail Wars in India. And they're literally talking about how these 5 or 6 families, one of them's aligned with Walmart, are going to go after these 500 million consumers that are coming online in India. And when you think about that, we're basically taking the global market that we can sell to and increasing that by 50% in the next 12 years. If you can't make money now, I don't know when you can. But you're going to have to get out and get beyond the developed world. Because the other number that I think a lot of us are not taking into account is 42% now of the global GDP is the developing world. And it's no longer when the developed world gets a cold, everybody gets pneumonia. It's almost vice versa in the marketplace. And so with that kind of theme, what we're doing is we're bringing some gurus on over. And we're following our standard people, strategy, and execution model. And so on the people side, we're excited. We're bringing in David Meerman Scott, beaming him in. And he literally has the #1 marketing book on the planet right now called Worldwide Rave. And he's the first guy to really, in business terms, translate this Web 2.0 technology into things that we can actually do in a practical sense and inexpensively to tap into the global market and use these technologies to do our marketing for us. And you're going to have to do that. It's time for us to fire up marketing and be the first to go after this 1 billion folks that are coming on board into the marketplace. So that's David, and that's really on the people side of the business. Strategy, I've mentioned to many of you privately, but if you said, what's your favorite business book of all time? It would be this book written in 1996 by this German named Hermann Simon. He wrote a book called Hidden Champions, and I love the title. And the subtitle was The 500 Best Unknown Companies. And the Jim Collins and others talk about, obviously, the Fortune 500. But what he has spent 3 decades doing is studying these 3,000 kind of Mittelstands, these mid-market firms. Many of them are, all of them privately held. Many of them are family-owned. And these are companies that have insane market share, anywhere between 50 to 100% in these very narrow niches. And as a result, they have insane profitability. They're able to price 15 to 20% higher than their competition. And their worst problem is they get in trouble in the EU for their monopolistic practices. And I wish that upon all of you as growth companies, that you're so powerful in the market that the EU, comes after you. And he has learned a set of lessons, having studied these companies, mainly German-speaking parts of the world. And many of you may or may not be aware, but Germany is the #1 exporter in the world, period. They beat China, they beat the United States, and they've got the fraction of the population. And it is these mid-market companies. There are a couple in Australia, but there's not enough. There's not enough here. There's not enough in our country, United States. And so we're bringing Herman to the developed countries to share his wisdom. By the way, his other expertise is pricing. And I don't know about you, but I never took a good course in pricing. And I find of the 4 P's of marketing, it's the only one that brings money directly in. The other 3 P's of marketing cost you before you make any. And so I think getting schooled, and part of his workshop he's going to be doing is schooling us on some of the top strategies for pricing. And so that's really going to be on the strategy piece, and excited to finally meet him personally for the first time. And then on the execution piece, and I've been fairly bold, and I'm going to stick to it, that the first company in any industry that fully embraces the Toyota production method of lean is going to dominate their industry. And in fact, it was right here in Sydney. I had been trying to get this meeting with Jim Womack, who wrote the book 20 years ago about this little company called Toyota. And everyone, he kept trying to say, guys, you need to pay attention to this company. And our industry, I know in the United States, ignored it. And 20 years later, they're now the dominant player. And so he and I have been trying to hook up. He was up in Boston, and finally, through some of the help here of our local friends, Jim and I ended up having dinner in Sydney. And we have been working on trying to bring Six Sigma from the GEs of the world down to mid-market companies to great disaster. And so I'm sitting there with Jim, and I'm saying, hey, what does Toyota think of Six Sigma? And he just starts laughing. And he says, look, they view it as using a nuclear weapon to knock down a molehill. And I'm like, yeah, that's how I view it. And I said, well, tell me about lean, because most people think of it only as manufacturing. And he said, Vern, remember, Toyota can design a car in half the time the rest of the industry can. And so when you're talking about designing software, when you're talking about designing processes, when you're talking about the service side of the business, this applies as much as any place. So I got excited. I said, so who can teach us? Because, it's typically been large companies being taught by folks who have taught large companies. He said, there's this guy, Guy Parsons. He ran a $20 million company, so he's one of us. He's been working hard at teaching these principles to service companies and franchisors and retailers and folks that are, software developers. And so we took a shot, and we had Guy speak opposite some of the biggest names, Jeffrey Moore and others, and he outrated all of them. And since then, we've had him working inside growth companies. And one of the examples I shared today was Nurse Next Door. He's an EO member on the other side of the planet, Vancouver. But in the 24 months their service staffing business had practiced lean, in essence, they've been able to double productivity everywhere in the business. Their call center can handle twice the volume it did before. They were able to double their revenue with the same headquarters staff. And so here's my overall goal and kind of message that we're going to share at the Growth Summit. I think what we as growth companies have to do, because we are the economic engines of our economies, is we have to get serious about doubling our revenue in the next 3 to 5 years. And if you, again, you don't accomplish that with what's around us in terms of market, you're asleep at the wheel. And I think in the same vein, do that without adding any net new headcount to the business. And I know the government might want to hear that in terms of job generation, but if you don't get that competitive, here's what I can assure you. And we just spent a year traveling the globe with our family and in China and in India. Those economies are birthing entrepreneurs who are hungrier than I've ever seen. They have that hunger, having not had stuff like we've had for so many decades, and they're birthing their businesses in very, very price competitive and tough environments. And they are itching to get out of their countries and get in our markets. And so the big lesson of Herman's research is the hidden champions almost day one got global. Because if you don't get in their markets, they're going to be in your market. And so I think it's imperative of the developed nations to finally wake up, get global, and get lean. And so we're excited about bringing this group of speakers here to Sydney. As you mentioned, the idea of the summit was to be this mini Think Week. Our inspiration, Bill Gates, who, by the way, still does this Think Week, even though he's now running his foundation instead of the company. And we're convinced it's the learners, those who learn fastest and then act, are going to be the ones who win. So thank you guys for being here. I'm really preaching to the choir. What I ask you to do is go grab another 10 companies that you know about, that you actually care about, and you drag them kicking and screaming here to the National Summit, and I know that they will thank you tenfold. So look forward to seeing you in February.